Hey everyone, my name is Nathan and welcome to Hail. This is the video I look forward to the most all year long because it's something that I'm constantly preparing for. Every single time I see a movie for the first time, I add it to a long list of movies that all share that same similarity of being watched for the first time in the given year. As the year goes on, I start compiling a list of my favorites from that large pool of first-time watches. The list always has to dwindle down to 10. Unfortunately, I wish I could talk about all the ones I love, but today I'm giving you my top 10 favorite first-time watches of 2022. Now, just in case there's any confusion, these are not 2022 releases. In fact, one of the rules that I have for this list is I have to exclude new releases as well as Criterion releases because I'll have separate lists for those. So basically, any movie that was released in 2021 or before, and as long as it's not in the Criterion collection, qualifies to make this list. There's really not much more to say. Let's go ahead and get started with the list. My number 10 goes to That Thing You Do. This was the first movie I watched in my 24-hour movie marathon in 2022, and it's cool that it stood out so much to not only be one of my favorites of the marathon, but one of my favorites of the year. Tom Everett Scott gives such a good performance and he makes his character so gosh darn likable. In fact, he's one of my favorite characters of the year. The story is also just a fun one to watch. It takes place in the 60s. It's about a band making it big. They start with a small song and then it blows up and they go on tour and kind of the drama that comes with that, but there's also plenty of moments of comedy as well. I watched the extended edition specifically, and so if you are looking for a version to watch, I suggest the extended edition, mostly because I don't know what they take out of it, but I liked it, and so watch that version. Number 9 is The Slender Thread. Sidney Poitier is one of my favorite actors of all time, and so I was very intrigued to watch this movie because of him, but also because of the plot. It's about a student who volunteers at a crisis center. He goes into his shift one night just expecting a calm night where he can kind of shoot the breeze and get it over with, until he gets a phone call from a lady who has just taken a large dose of pills and is currently dying slowly on the phone. And so the movie is all about Sidney Poitier's character trying to get her help as soon as possible. It's about trying to track where she is, but also just be there for her so that she doesn't like fall asleep or anything. Sidney Poitier gives an amazing performance, and one thing that I love about him as an actor is he's always able to emit true emotions and true reactions. Even the way he hesitates, thinking of what he's going to say next to this lady on the phone. It's so powerful, it's so believable, and that's why he's one of my favorite actors of all time. My number 8 goes to a noir-vember watch. It is The Big Heat. I feel like I really discovered Glenn Ford as an actor this year, and so when it came to noir-vember, sure, there are plenty of noir movies I want to watch, but I was able to easily prioritize this over others, not only because of Glenn Ford starring it, but also it being directed by Fritz Lang. The best thing about The Big Heat is you get the classic noir dialogue. It's very dark as well. It's always fun seeing a dark movie from the 50s or the black and white era in general, but I also really like Glenn Ford's character. He goes through so much and he doesn't ever get pushed around through any of it. He always stands his ground. He's always the toughest guy in the room, and for that, it made it a very engaging and entertaining watch. A Patch of Blue was a very sweet story. It's about a blind white girl falling in love with Sidney Poitier, an African-American man. But because she's blind, she doesn't realize that he's African-American, and her parents, her family, they're very racist. It builds for a lot of drama for the story and conflict as to what's going to happen and how the story's going to end. But what I loved most about the movie were the performances, but also just watching the story unfold and kind of the romance build between these two characters. It's a very special watch. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching it. Number 6 is possibly the most underrated watch on this whole list. It's a film from the 40s. It is called The Tales of Manhattan. I was intrigued for this movie because it has an absolute all-star cast from the 40s. It's an anthology tale, which can either be hit and miss. In this case, of course, it was a hit for me, about a suit coat that gets passed along from one owner to the next. So it's basically Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, but in the 40s. But it's so interesting to just follow this suit coat and see how the owners interact with it and how different their lives are compared to the last owner of the suit coat. As you can imagine, each tale has a different starring member of it, but my favorite one of all of them was Charles Lawton's tale. It's a very sweet story. If you want to watch the movie, the whole thing's on YouTube. Let's hope we get this on the Criterion collection someday, or just on Blu-ray in general. Speaking of movies I would love to get a Blu-ray release, my number 5 is Advise and Consent. Advise and Consent is a movie starring Charles Lawton and Henry Fonda, and to quote Peter Bogdanovich, he said it's by far the best political movie ever made in the country. I don't know if I would go as far to say that yet, at least. I have only seen it once after all. I definitely want to see it again, but I can see where he's coming from because the movie is full of so much corruption, deceit, lying, dishonesty, illegal actions. It's a crazy movie, and I cannot believe that this movie doesn't have more attention on it. Don Murray and Charles Laughton were the two standouts for me in this film. Don Murray especially because I didn't really know him going into the film, and so I was pleasantly surprised with how good he was in this film. This movie was also pretty special for me because it was Charles Laughton's final movie. Knowing that while watching it made his final scene that much more impactful. Number 4 is my latest watch from 2022. It's one that I watched actually on Christmas night itself. It's the 1994 adaptation of Little Women. The story of Little Women is so special to me. I read the book and I finished it on Christmas Day, hence my watch of this movie. I had only seen the 2019 version, so I really wanted to check out the 94 version. Winona Ryder is one of my favorite actresses, one that I really want to see more of because I love her in anything I see her in. She has this way of acting, the way she reacts to different things. It's so unique from other performers. Plus, the story of Little Women is such a beautiful story. If I were to choose standouts for me from this movie, besides Winona Ryder, of course, it would be Claire Danes as Beth, Christian Bale as Laurie, and Kirsten Dunst as Amy. This is such a cozy film. It takes place at Christmas time. There's snow. It's in the late 1800s. It's just such a good movie. It's Little Women. Come on. Number 3 is my favorite movie I watched from my 24-hour movie marathon last year. That is the 60s version of Cape Fear. I think that if Strangers on a Train and Night of the Hunter were to have a kid, it would be Cape Fear. It is full of suspense. It's full of a creepy performance by Robert Mitchum. But funny enough, the standout to me is from Gregory Peck's daughter in it. Her name is Laurie Martin, and I don't believe she did too many other performances, but this one is just such a good one. She's a child in it, and a lot of times a child can break a movie with a poor performance, but she gives anything but that here. There's a scene in particular that takes place in a school where she thinks that she's being chased by someone, and it is so suspenseful, just very creepy, had me on the edge of my seat. I watched this halfway through my marathon. I think it was the 7th movie that I watched. I should have been dead tired watching a black and white film, but it was the most alert I was in the marathon. I was glued to the screen, and I can't wait to watch it again. Also, fun little fact, this is the first movie to come out of one of my 24-hour movie marathons to get a 10 out of 10. Blackboard Jungle. One of my favorite subgenres of movies is when a teacher comes to a classroom of misbehaved children and just changes them, becomes their role model, their hero, and changes their lives. Some other examples of this, of course, I think the most popular one is Dead Poet Society. There's also a foreign language film called The Chorus, which I love. It was one of my favorite watches of the year I saw it. And then there's even a Twilight Zone episode called The Changing of the Guard. There's also, funny enough, the Sidney Poitier film To Sir with Love. But what all these movies have in common is that a teacher is coming into a class of troubled students and they're changing their lives. I was hooked to Blackboard Jungle right away with the message it has at the beginning of the movie. It basically just says that although this is a work of fiction, this is a real problem of having juveniles that are misbehaving and causing problems in the school system. And then right after you see that serious message, it kicks in Rock Around the Clock, which is such a catchy song. But the whole movie, you're rooting for Glenn Ford to really change these students' lives. And although it doesn't have the ending that you're expecting, one maybe as significant as Dead Poet Society, but it has an ending where you know that there's a firm resolve. Change has happened, and I was very happy by the end of the movie. It is kind of a tough watch. It's definitely not a stroll through the park with the performances and with the way the kids act and everything. I still really enjoyed it. When a movie can just grab my attention and not make me want to look away, then that's when it's doing a good job. A quick little fun fact about Blackboard Jungle, I told my grandma, or I call her Gramsy, that I was watching Blackboard Jungle because I knew that she was a big fan of Sidney Poitier as well. And she told me that when this movie came out when she was younger, she actually wasn't allowed to see it. Her mom wouldn't let her see it because of the reputation it had with displaying misbehaved children. And so I thought that was so fascinating and kind of a fun tidbit from back in the day. And my number one favorite first time watch of 2022 has to go to Once Upon a Time in the West. This movie was watched as part of my 25 movies challenge where I challenged myself to watch 25 westerns in 2022. Sergio Leone has to be the western master of suspense. He is so good at crafting an intense gun battle. He has the close-ups of the characters' faces, and there's so many cuts back and forth between the characters interacting, and it happens in all of his movies, but it never gets old. I love it, and I look forward to it each time it happens. Once Upon a Time in the West has so many distinct, memorable characters. Henry Fonda playing a villain is shocking, but he killed it. Literally, he killed a lot of people in this movie. I didn't think he had it in him to play such a good menacing villain, but my goodness, he is horrifying in this film. Charles Bronson also kills it with his harmonica character. I loved his character. I loved any time that we heard the harmonica, we were like, oh no, he's coming, he's near. He was so cool to watch. The movie as a whole, it is just such a fun time. It's a long movie, but so much happens in it, and I was never bored either. It's my favorite Sergio Leone film, just behind The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Anyways, those were my 10 favorite watches of 2022. Now I want you to keep an eye out for my next video. It will be my 10 favorite first-time Criterion watches of 2022. Should be a fun time there. I probably won't release my 2022 ranking until March so that I can have more time to actually watch movies that I haven't seen yet. But at the end of this month, I do have my awards show. This will be the 3rd year I've done it, and that's where I bring together all these movies and I crown the best movie of the year. Now that also includes Criterions, new releases, and first-time watches that don't fit those categories, and so it's choosing like an ultimate number one. So you won't want to miss that. That will be at the end of this month. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you have a great day.